All right. So today we will put this over here on the way. Today we're going to talk about advertising and TREC compliance. How to advertise according to TREC's rules, which is really important. I do discuss this in the orientation, but TREC, whenever there's a complaint against you as an agent, TREC Googles you. They take a look at all your advertising, they look at your email formats, they look at all of this stuff. And if there's any compliance related issues, they recently I've noticed with the complaints that I've dealt with that they're giving the agent 30 days to get into compliance. So there's a little bit of grace there. Historically, they've just fined the agent. And so I'm thankful that they're not just, beating the agents over it. But still, it's better to have it already compliant so that whenever they do look and they see, agents advertising from Spirit, that everything is already, compliant. Everything's good to go so they can just focus on the investigation piece. And that is also another feather in our hat to show that, we're a type of brokerage that takes the rules seriously. Those people that, maybe are out of compliance with their advertising, that might be a indicator to some other issues related to the investigation. And so it's better to just have all your ducks in a row, everything looking good, so that the investigation can go off without a hitch, hopefully. All right, so today we're going to talk about the different forms of advertising that TREC looks at. They're going to look at your email format. They're going to look at, if you have business cards out there, this is a form of advertising. Websites and social medias are just so critical right now. And then a realtor sign or signage that you're using, and then of course using AI to generate this advertising content. So we'll talk about that and the issues with that using that. It's a great tool, but there's just some things that you need to take note of before utilizing those tools. So first, we'll talk about emails. Number one, just always be careful about what you're putting in writing. Misrepresentation, false advertising, misleading. People can have a tendency to, talk too much or say too much, especially whenever they're working with clients. And that can actually lead them to get into trouble because putting in filler words and using that creative side of your brain has a tendency to, stray outside of hard facts. So just, whenever you're communicating, especially whenever you're communicating through writing, reread your emails. Have other people look at your emails, especially if it might be a more tense or complicated relationship that you have with your client. Have someone look it over and make sure that, what's being said is factually correct, not emotional. These things can play a part in being issues later on. So, you know, just be careful about what you put in there because it all needs to be able to be proven correct. If you decide to try to embellish the truth and that is in writing, then that can come back to haunt you later on. Once it's in an email and sent, it doesn't come back. It's done. Same with text message. Once it's out there, it's gone forever and it's forever saved on someone else's phone or device or something out there. Next is, in the email itself, signature. This is where you can check that IABS requirement. Now, TREC states that we are required to provide an information about broker services at the first substantive conversation with the client. They have also stated that if you put it in the signature, in the bot, like in an email, that's okay. You can have a link to your completed IABS in an email. but they have a stipulation to that rule that it needs to appear as though it's in the body of the email. So what that means is, yes, you can still use a pre-made signature block, but it needs to be above the valediction, the best regards. It needs to be above that. Your signature, everything else needs to be below that. They will not accept it if the link is at the bottom of your signature block. So just make sure it's at the top, make sure it's always working. You can use a Google Drive to upload, or iDrive or whatever, to upload these documents. Just make sure that the link that you pull off of it is shareable to everyone, that they can view it. And then after you put set up your signature, send it to yourself, send it to other people so that they can test it and verify. You can send it to us, and we're happy to test it and make sure that it is working and is filled out properly. So under TREC Rule 535-155D, you are not allowed to represent yourself as anything that implies that you're responsible for the brokerage. This is more critical to those agents who are team managers or entity owners. You have created something. You've created a business. You are an entrepreneur. Yes, all these things are true. However, TREC does not want you to represent that you're the one that's responsible for the brokerage, because at the end of the day, Trella and TREC state that the broker is. So in your signature block, you cannot put owner, founder, creator, anything similar to that. CEO, president, CEO, all of these other terms that imply some higher level of ownership is not okay to them. What they say you are allowed to use is what you've been given by TREC. If you are a delegated supervisor, if I've made you one through TREC, you've completed your broker responsibility, you're over a handful of agents, we can set you as a delegated supervisor. You can actually list, supervisor as a title on your signature block. That's fine. But again, those requirements must be met, and you just let us know. We're happy to hand that over. There's no additional costs. You just complete the broker responsibility course, of which you can get that at like Champions Online and complete it in a couple hours. I mean, it's not a difficult course at all. And I really like it whenever agents do that, because you get to see what the brokerage is ultimately responsible for. So next, the brokerage name or broker's name must be included. Whoever your sponsoring brokerage is, if you're sponsored by a firm like Spirit Real Estate Group, or if you're sponsored by directly underneath a broker, then that name needs to be included, and it needs to be half the size of the largest contact. So if you've got, a phone number that's fairly sizable, then that broker's name needs to be at least half that size. Now, if you're underneath a firm, you don't have to list both the firm name, that is the brokerage, and the designated broker, just the brokerage. That's all that's necessary. Okay. Next, so business cards. Lots of people use business cards, it's perfectly fine, but it still has the broker's name rule where it needs to be at least half the size of the largest contact info. So if you decide you want to put a giant phone number on your card, just make sure that the broker's name is at least half that size. I recommend, if you put together a business card that you want to use, just send it to us so that we can check it first for compliance. That way you get another set of eyes on it before you pay for these to be printed. Including an email address or websites, these are okay. Just make sure that they're valid. Don't use a website that's dead, that's under construction. Don't put it on there, because TREC will still go to it. And if it doesn't meet all the minimum requirements, you can get into trouble. So just make sure that whatever website and email address that you put on there are valid, and that you are accessing those. It's recommended that you include like a fair housing logo or even equal housing wording, just because it just displays that level of trustworthiness on your advertising. And then again, back on titles. You're allowed to use what's been given to you by TREC or the association. So, realtor, licensed real estate agent, locator or apartment locator, relocation specialist, sales agent, something similar that is on that agent level is perfectly fine. And then again, delegated supervisor or supervisor, those are okay too. Just anything else you need to check with us before putting it on there. All right, so website, again, valid website, just critical. But broker's name, a lot of this stuff is going to get a little bit repetitive, unfortunately, but these are the rules that TREC has set. So if you have a website, it can be whatever site name you want, and it doesn't necessarily have to be registered with TREC. It doesn't have to be a group or a team name. It can be what you want it to be. Um, and then just make sure that the brokerage or team names are listed on the site itself so that it's being marketed properly. The broker's name has to be on every page. Can't just be on the About Us or the team page. It needs to be on every single page. It's recommended that you put it in the footer because the footer is present on every page. And so you can put it there along with your links to the IBS and the Consumer Protection Notice. And I'll talk more about that on the next slide. But, branding wise, for the broker's name, you could put like powered by or brokered by and the broker's name in the footer. And it just needs to be half that size of whatever that contact, the largest contact is on the page. And then for branding, teams and groups, make sure it's the full team or group name. It needs to be compliant with TREC. And TREC states that any group or team name needs to end with team or group. It needs to be registered with them. So if you are going to be marketing, the super duper locating team, it needs to have not just super duper locating, but super duper locating team on the page as the group or team name. It cannot include any name like brokerage, company, associates in the name because that implies a standalone entity, and that's not allowed. So just keep these things in mind if you're going to be doing any type of self-branding, which again is not against the rules. It just needs to make sure that it complies with the rules. All right, so the information about broker services, they put out a new one again this year. Just make sure if you have a website that you're using the most current information about broker services. Make sure it's completed with the correct information. It has the brokerage firm name, if applicable, has the designated broker's name. If there's a supervisor over you, you can list them. And then, of course, your agent name. If it's an individual page, just go ahead and put your agent name. If this is more for a team or an entity that has a number of agents, you don't have to have the agent name listed on the bottom, but you definitely have to have the designated broker, supervisor, and firm if applicable. Consumer protection notice. So right now they're doing 1-5. They may end up, later this year putting out a new consumer protection notice. So just make sure that you go to the TREC link that's on this page, form/consumer protection notice, and it'll have the latest version of the consumer protection notice that you can download. You can print the PDF, you can save it in your Google Docs, you can use that link as the link to your consumer protection notice that needs to be placed in the footer. Now, with information about broker services and the consumer protection notice links, they have rules detailed about these links. They have to be at least 12-point font. They need to say either the Texas Real Estate Commission Consumer Protection Notice or capital TREC consumer protection notice. It has to be one or the other. It cannot be anything else. It can't be CPN or IBS. It has to have it completely spelled out, and you can only use the acronym for TREC, not anything else. Um, and then again, with a website, don't list yourself as owner, founder, CEO, broker, anything like that, because that can get you into some trouble. Social media, you'll find that it has similar rules to websites because, again, broker's name, IBS, consumer protection notice, all the similar rules that these need to be made visible and available to any users of your social media platform. Now, there are some additional options available to you, like a link tree, which is pretty neat. If you upload a link tree to your social media platform, TREC has allowed that. And in the link tree, you can have your IBS and your consumer protection notice all saved in that same link tree. And then you can upload that link tree to your Facebook, your Insta, your TikTok. All of these can have use the same link tree, and it can make them all compliant at the same time. Don't list yourself as a responsible party. You're not an owner, founder, or anything like that. Um, and then TREC has put out a social media training. It's this link here that you can go to, and it talks about more details about like posts and things that you need to be aware of. I recommend that you embed like the company logo in your posts, especially if the company logo includes the broker's name. The more opportunities that you can take to brand properly, the better, so that there's less chance of you, not of being out of compliance there. Signs, signage, print media, that kind of stuff. Team and group names, they're permitted as long as they follow those name rules. We talked about it earlier. They can be as big as you want. They can take up the whole, big chunk of the sign. But again, broker's name needs to be included at least half the size of the largest contact info. So phone number, email, that kind of stuff. And it can use, powered by, brokered by, anything like that. That is all okay. It's recommended to include the fair housing logo, which, again, just displays trustworthiness. And if you're going to put a website or email on there, just make sure they are valid and they're working properly. Using AI. So, using AI to create content, it's okay. It's even recommended for efficiency and proficiency because AI, it's able to, it draws from the internet. You can ask it, what's the best, you know, format for a realtor sign that goes in a yard? What's the, best uh, content strategy I should use for my Instagram profile? There's lots of really good information out there. But then once you traverse over to it creating content, that's where some issues can happen, right? Um, Learn all you want, but whenever you use it for content, you need to be careful because it is pulling from available sources out there that may not necessarily be available for you to use. It can modify or use an image that's copyrighted, or it can use content that is copyrighted from a book or a magazine or something like that. And if you aren't searching it, just know that people who have copyrighted material are searching it. And if they find, you utilized a paragraph or a image that they copyrighted, then they can sue you. They can sue the company. They can sue me. They can sue all of us. So it's better to just go ahead and if you use, say, ChatGPT or some AI platform to develop some content, take that content, put it into like Perplexity and say, hey, can you cross check this content and make sure it's not copyrighted anywhere? Is there any concerns I should have in using this image? These types of questions that you ask another AI can prompt a search, a background search of that image and let you know, actually, this image came from, you know, the Times Magazine. If you use this, you could be in some serious trouble. So just, back and fact check yourself, the content that's being created. And then if you have it create, say, content for a blog or an article or a white paper or even like a description of a property, you got to be careful because it may say beautiful home nestled in a quaint neighborhood that has, lots of young kids, so it's perfect for a family of four, blah, 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 blah. Well, that right there is a fair housing violation because familial status is a protected class. And if they feel that you hurt their feelings because of this, they could file a fair housing complaint about your advertising. And they'll have traction on it because you said it's perfect, you're steering towards a family and not for someone who may not be able to have families. So just, double check the content that's be creating, make sure that it's not talking about any protected classes, and then also the content isn't copyrighted that's being used or pulled from another source. Okay, so that's basically it. There's, not a whole lot to be aware of. We're going to have an advanced risk and RESPA coverage here in the next week or two. I would highly recommend you go through that. We also have minimizing liability training. These are all great trainings to help you be more aware about what you're doing and saying to help protect you and your clients in the brokerage from frivolous lawsuits and stuff. So anything available, to be seen in the public to be is considered advertising. So if you're using your own personal social media account and you talk about your real estate activities, that's an advertising platform. That's not your social media, private social media account anymore. So just, keep that in mind, and all the advertising rules and laws that are set for it apply as soon as you start using it for advertising. If you have a social media that's completely separate, that you only talk about private matters on, and there's no real estate stuff on there at all, then you're okay. It doesn't have to be compliant. It's just the channels that you're using for advertising. Um, Send everything that you're planning on posting to the broker to review for compliance. This is just a good practice to get an extra set of eyes. Email, signatures, text messages, posts, websites, designs, prints, proofs, all of these things you can send to us. We will review it and get back to you with feedback on anything that you need to be made aware of. And everyone should Google themselves after this training. Take a look at what's out there advertising wise and see. One agent, she got in trouble because she had an old Zillow ad that she had posted where she referred to herself as a broker, and it was long before she was a real estate agent. She was working for a firm as an assistant, and she was brokering transactions underneath that company. But so she may not have been lying at that time, but because it was still out there and she referred to herself as a broker, TREC dinged her. So just, go and Google yourself, take a look and see what's out there and just make sure it's all compliant. And if it's not, take it down or update it. And the reason why is because TREC will do the exact same thing if they get a complaint about you. All right, so that's it. I'll open it up for any questions.
I've got a couple.
Sure, go for it.
Can the IABS be attached as a document
To what?
to the first contact email with the client? Can you just attach it instead of trying to embed it in the email?
Yes, yes, you can. The reason why I mentioned it in the signature block is because it's automatic. You don't have to
Right.
think about it. It's just done. So if you forget to embed it and it gets called into question, then it could be an issue. Um, I do realize that, embedding can be a challenge at times. But if you're having issues with that, we could certainly help you with that. Um, or you could even just take the link that we provide on the Spirit site and use that. So there's different ways that you can go about providing the IBS, but the reason why I mentioned the signature block is just because it's just automatic. You don't have to think about it. It's just done, you know?
No, I appreciate that, but if I, just from the angle of not cluttering up every email I send, is
Yeah.
it technically okay to include it the first time and
Yep.
that's it?
Yep. Yep. You
Okay.
could totally
No,
do
I
that.
appreciate what you're saying to avoid any issue ever.
Yeah.
Um, if you're doing an ad for an apartment and you want to offer a rebate, should the
Mhm.
wording be as simple as 20% rebate, contact me for additional details or something?
So what I usually recommend, if you're going to advertise it, just know that you got to provide it to everyone, right? And then at the same time, the wording that you use is important to know. What I recommend, because people don't necessarily understand percentages because they don't know what you're getting paid, to be honest. What has worked successfully in the past on offering rebates is a rebate up to $250, whatever you want to have it up to amount to. And then have, like, we have a rebate details page that goes, that actually talks about the terms and conditions of the rebate, where it's dependent upon the commission that we receive from the property. So you can have the 20% set personally to do whatever you want. I would just recommend, for simplicity's sake, if you're going to advertise that you're offering it, do like up to X amount. And then if they want more information, you can do a page like how the rebate works. And then you can go into more details about how it works in there.
Gotcha. When advertising apartments, I should know this by now, but you can't use apartment website photos without permission. Is that how that works? Or
So here's the deal. Apartments won't come after you, or are not likely to come after you, if you're advertising their property with their photos, right? But they paid a photographer to develop those photos. They claim that they have copyrighted those photos. So any use of those without their written permission can get you into some trouble. So if you need to use them for an advertisement, then I would recommend getting their, written authorization to use it. And you could even state, I'm using it to advertise your property, your current specials. If you have that, then you're golden. The alternative is if you use apartment data, it's like $50 for the initial setup, and then there's no recurring costs, and they allow agents to use all their photos, period.
yeah, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's the
so
way to
you can just pay that $50, the initial cost, and then they have almost all the apartments out there anyways, and they got the authority from the apartment communities to use their photos in most cases. So it may even be the exact same photos that's on their website.
Last question. So I'm starting to, like everybody thinking more about AI and I don't know, I think our job is complicated enough that it's probably safe for a while and the AI will probably just help us do the job better. And I was just
Yeah.
wondering, especially an apartment side, I can see it helping out financial screening and all kinds of things. But do you see anything coming, whether it's apartments or MLS on the AI front that's going to help us sooner than later necessarily, or are you just kind of waiting to see what happens?
So what I see on my end is I have a, a number of companies that even utilize our services right now that use AI to vet and sales funnel leads. So they're already actively using AI in an agent level of use. Um, we are in the process of actually, you should see it in the coming weeks. We are in the process of developing our own LLM ourselves that will be integrated within the CRM. Starting out, it's just going to be a chatbot because we need to, train it and build content and stuff. And so we're going to open that up to the agents to use it. Um, but eventually, once we have our own private LLM, the plan is to have it help agents with, email correspondence. I mean, the advancements of AI are so rapid right now. Like this time next year, it'll be, making our lunch for us, it kind of deal. So it's really doing a lot right now. Um, on the marketing side, you can use it to develop content and, really get some good advertising quality out there. As far as like helping clients, I think that the listing services and the websites that are out there already employing AI to help people find what they're looking for. And then as far as agents, their benefits are more on the side of, helping manage follow-ups and emails and that kind of stuff. But there isn't much more than just that right now. So we recognize that AI is becoming more and more prevalent, especially in the real estate industry. And so we've already started taking steps ourselves to employ it, even if it's just to do it an initial chat bot to start gathering, content and how we can help the agents individually. But we don't want to be one of those people that's, you know, a few years down the road trying to start um, and getting left behind because other brokerages are already doing this.
Cool, thanks.
Tom, you got anything?
I'm pretty good. I mean,
Okay.
it's
All right. Good
good,
deal.
good one.
Well, if y'all have any other questions, those of you who are watching the video, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help anytime. Thanks and God bless.